Welcome to our Lenten fundraising stream for Most Holy Trinity Seminary. I'm Stephen Heiner, and with us for the first part of this live stream is Reverend Mr. Aidan Gilchrist. Hello, Reverend.
Hello, Mr. Heiner.
So we are going to be raising funds for the seminary as we do once a quarter, and part of that will be mentioning some things that the seminary is involved with, but part of it will be getting to know our newly ordained deacon and subdeacons. So I think I'll start with that. Reverend Gilchrist, you were, unlike many of us, born into a Sedevacantist family. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. I was raised Sedevacantist from the beginning, although my family came to Sedevacantism in the early to mid-90s. So it would have been early 90s, I believe. There were priests that went on mission down to New Zealand and started speaking to them about the situation in the church. It was my uncle who was the first, Edmund Gilchrist. He was the first to become a Sedevacantist.
And I should add, watchers and listeners, if you'd like to ask questions, I can't promise that we'll get to all of them, but if you'd like to put questions in the live chat, I'll try to get to them as we move through our different interviewees. So you were born in New Zealand, correct?
Yes, that's right.
But you moved when you were quite young.
Yes, I moved, it was 2001. I was about 6 years of age. I have some memories of New Zealand, very fond memories, particularly of the countryside, my hometown, and my grandparents on my father's side, on my mother's side as well, but I would say particularly on my father's side, because they were very devout, my grandparents, very devout. So I remember praying the rosary with them and learning a lot about the faith from them.
Well, I mean, it is Middle Earth after all, so it is a beautiful place to live.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Although the movies make it out as if Mordor and Hobbiton are quite far apart from each other, but in reality, they're pretty close.
So I'd asked you when we were talking about this the other day if you'd always felt a call to the priesthood, and you said actually from quite a young age.
Yes, the first time I thought about it was in New Zealand. I was about 5 years of age, and what triggered the thought, from my recollection, I had a picture, I still have it, of St. Anthony of Padua with the child Jesus, and the first thought I had is I want to live a life like he did. I didn't know much about St. Anthony, but I had this intuition to live a consecrated life in some sense. But that was the genesis. That was the earliest thought that I had about dedicating myself to God in a way that was beyond, I suppose, the ordinary, in a sense, rather than just being a layman or getting married. I had this intuition of I should dedicate myself entirely to God. And then over the next couple of years, I remember that the idea becoming more clear and more explicit in my mind that I would want to pursue the priesthood. At the time, it was very much the religious priesthood. Well,
like St. Anthony.
Yes, exactly. So,
and I asked if you had some younger, children. When they feel this inclination, they will sometimes dress up and
yes.
pretend to say Mass. They act like they're saying Mass. And you said that you hadn't, but that you had created a Mass situation in
right.
which your toys would attend Mass.
Right. I didn't do the whole dress up as a priest and give out the communion with the bread, with the little, take the bread, white bread or something like that, and feed it to your brothers and sisters. All my brothers and sisters are older than me. The one closest to me in age is 7 years older, so I was very much playing on my own. But yes, I did. Take my action figures. I had a lot of Star Wars toys, but I figured that. Even in Star Wars, they would need the Mass. So I had Darth Vader attending Mass in the pews, and I had a priest, and you had all these weird aliens and action figures all attending the Mass. I just knew that, okay, it's a weird universe, but they need the Mass.
And they have their priorities in order. I mean, it's good that Darth Vader was at Mass.
Oh, I wasn't going to have pagan toys. I mean, what is that?
I've seen various setups like that. I'm very edified that children just have that innate sense of this is an important part of my universe, the Mass, and that means the other things that are in my universe, these toys, they should follow my instincts. And I think it's very sweet.
No, yeah, it's true. It was the same thing. Just growing up, I would continue that. I would play out in the garden. I'd use these little. I had this whole collection of different pebbles. I'd use child's imagination, and they would always. The faith was always involved. I would have them going on crusade, fighting, Islam and things like that. But yeah, the Mass was always there. The religious virtues were always there in my mind. I just thought the idea of having a faithless imagination was distasteful to me.
And it's a good point that moral universe has to be, even if you're playing with your toys, that moral universe should invade the way that you think about how you're playing with them.
Right. I didn't really appreciate that as much as I do now. But I think of Tolkien, J.R. Tolkien, where he speaks about man and his desire to what he calls subcreate. And really, with our imaginations, obviously, it's not strictly speaking creation, but we take what God has already created and we rearrange it and we make these little imaginary worlds. But I couldn't ever, so to speak, escape into an imaginary world without the faith. That always had to go with me. That aspect of reality always had to be there from the beginning. I have strong memories of that. And the idea of ever, even as a child, even playing in a made-up world and it not having any reference to God or the faith in some way, it's completely repugnant to me. So it's true, the faith manifests itself even in children, and I think, yes, even in their imaginations, as you point out, a lot of people, a lot of little girls, they might dress up as nuns or All Saints Day, they'll dress up as saints, and so yes, it permeates your whole being, including your imagination, or it should anyway. There shouldn't be anything that the faith doesn't inform in your life, just as charity should inform everything that you do in your life. So even as a little child, when you don't necessarily fully understand why you think this way.
So you're a deacon now, so you've been saying the office for some time. How has that developed for you from when you were a subdeacon to now the diaconate? I know it hasn't been a very long time, but how has the office, having to say it regularly, been a different aspect of your spiritual life?
Oh, well, first and foremost, it's been wonderful. It's such an honor to be able to have this obligation of saying the office every day. I think about, there's a joke about when you become a subdeacon that you're married to the office, and it's quite true. I don't know how it is that you could... now that with the duties of the priesthood coming closer and closer and becoming obviously more and more aware of all of the duties, I don't know how it is a priest could be a priest, could do all of the studies that he needs to do, and ever be married. His life, he is married to his priestly duties. He is married to the office. And the office is a wonderful, it's my time to offer up prayers for the mystical body of Christ. It's my time to speak with God, and it's a wonderful thing to be obligated to take time aside every single day and speak with God. And obviously, it's speaking interiorly with the intellect and making sure you pronounce all the words properly, and even though you're not necessarily audible. Paying attention to the meaning of the lessons, things like that. It's a tremendous honor to be able to do that every single day. It can be a little tricky sometimes when you have, for example, we've got exam week, so that's a new challenge. But I'm doing fine. I've gotten used to that.
So this is actually the last chance that we'd have to have you on a seminary live stream, because you are leaving us next week.
Yes, I'm leaving, it will be Thursday afternoon, the coming Thursday. So our exams finish on the Wednesday, so it's very busy. I have to study, get my exams done. In the meantime, make sure that I've prepared everything for my journey to Nantes in France. And then obviously there's the preparations for Holy Week, so it's a busy next 2 weeks.
And it's not as if you're leaving seminary formation, you're just leaving this part of the seminary formation because Father Duterte, one of the professors, is there, so you'll have some live classes with him as you move towards ordination.
Yes, that's true. I'll still be in a seminary-esque environment where I will finish off the remaining classes that I have. The classes that some classes I have to have over Zoom now anyway. Bishop Fleece is down in Florida, so he does Zoom classes. So that won't be too different for me. Obviously, there'll be the time difference though, but it's not too bad. It's only about I think it's maybe 5-6 hours, 6 at most. So it's manageable, and also I'm looking forward to going back to that time zone. I've been used to that time zone for years.
For many years. Well, also, I mean, it's obviously it's Europe, it's France,
Right.
And I think I would encourage any of our watchers and listeners who are in Europe already to take the opportunity to potentially come to Reverend Gilchrist's ordination, which will be June the 29th. It's a Saturday in Nantes, and I don't know if it will be streamed if they can't make it, but we'll do our best. Certainly, I will do my best to make sure that it is streamed. But otherwise, come in person. It's a wonderful thing to see a priestly ordination. And also the church there in Nantes is also a lovely church. It's worth seeing. We have a super chat from Andrew McFarland for $20. God bless our new deacon and subdeacons. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
And from the American Sedeprationist, $2. Reverend, how do you wish to grow the British missions? I suppose I might reframe that because it's not, I should say, Corey, that it's Father is still subject to his superior, and it's part of where he will be sent and when he will be sent. So it's not entirely his mandate, but if there's even such a thing. But I would say maybe rephrase the question, Reverend. Where do you see opportunities potentially to help form the English and British faithful?
Yes, obviously everything that I will do, it will always be under the guidance of the older priests who are there in Nantes. That only makes sense when you're a young priest. You're not some sort of action hero. You very much you're a soldier in war. If you don't want to get shot, you keep your head down, keep your helmet on, follow the rules, the guidelines of all the priests. But obviously, in keeping with that, and following the advice of the older priests, Father Duterte, Father de la Channonnet, and they understand the missionary side of things a lot more than myself. Obviously, I have no experience in missionary work, but that's also another reason why I'm heading off to Nantes early. The ordination will be there, but also it's to become more accustomed to France and also helping the priests out with the missions. Sort of a what would you call that? Sort of a soft.
Well, you'll be able to do baptisms and...
Yes, exactly. So taking on the burdens and responsibilities, it will be in quick succession, but this still gives me time to pace it out and take on all the burdens and understand exactly what I need to do. But in terms of future plans for the mission, it will be very much in coordination with all the other clergy. But just off the top of my head, I mean, the faithful always need to be educated and re-educated in the faith. We constantly need to be learning and relearning and reminding ourselves of the truths of the faith, deepening them, and then also because of the weakness of ignorance, it's always possible that an error has crept into our minds. So having a priest going through the catechism with us and more advanced classes, he can sweep away any error that may have entered into our minds. That's one of the large problems, obviously, today is there's a great ignorance of the doctrines of the faith. It's why you have such things as R&R. I mean, if people really understood their faith, I mean, such a thing as R&R wouldn't exist. So it just shows that, and it's not their fault. It's, again, we've been deprived of the teaching authority on earth, and really it's there to correct us if we ever go astray. And the Pope is the vicar of Christ and represents the voice of Christ and speaks with his authority and is a loving father to us. But right now we don't have our Father on earth, so it makes things a bit more tricky. Not impossible, but it's certainly we certainly feel the pain of that, and that comes out in the wounds of sin, particularly the wound of ignorance. So the clergy always have to strive to continue to be educated, to continue with their own education, and then their own contemplation, and then pass that on to the faithful, so that the faithful may reap the rewards of that too. So I would say that would be one of a great focus for me, is making sure that the faithful really understand their faith, but that understanding should lead to a loving contemplation. It cannot merely be abstract. It has to be effectual. It has to affect a change in your life, your priorities, everything. The whole person has to undergo, so to speak, a Christianization. It has to turn into Christ over time. That includes the purification of the higher faculties of the intellect and the will of the soul, but then also of the passions and the affections. All of those things have to be more and more united by the virtue of charity, which is the love of God. So more and more there has to be this unity in everything that we do. There has to be a greater intensity in all the things that we do. And that can only come about through theoretical education and sort of the doctrines of the faith, but also the practice of the faith through the liturgy, and then also through our private devotions and mortifications, etc.
So my last question for you for today is, now that you're creeping up on, let's say, 90 days, 100 days before you will become a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek, God willing, is your reflection that this has come much sooner than you expected, or has it been a logical in your mind as far as time that this is exactly when you thought it would happen?
The answer to that question is yes and no. It's been the first time I started to, I guess, begin this journey where I actually took action. I think I was 16 years of age. So it's been over 10 years. So it has been a long journey. At the same time, though, yes, the priesthood has, despite that, it has crept up on me. It's happened. So it seems like a long time on the one hand when I say that, but then on the other hand, no, it's happened very quickly.
Well, we give you our best wishes and our prayers for not only your exams this week, but for your safe travel to Nantes and your preparation for ordination. And hopefully, as I say, if you can make it, not just for European, but anywhere else in the world, if you feel like you can make it to Nantes, I would encourage you. A priestly ordination is a wonderful thing to see, and you can watch Reverend Mr. Gilchrist turn into Father Gilchrist.
Yes.
Thank you very much for your time, Reverend.
Thank you, Mr. Heine. Thank you.
All right, as I wait for our next newly ordained seminarian in major orders to join us, I'm just going to talk about a few of these items, which are now on RomanCatholicMedia.org in the store. There's a handy tumbler for hot and cold drinks, which has the seminary logo on it. There's also a handsome black mug and a notebook. A nice notebook. All of these have the seminary logo in English. This one's got a nice pocket. I think our goal was to have items that people would actually use, as opposed to just buying something frivolous to support the seminary. We want you to support the seminary and also have something useful. So please consider buying them. You can find that at the store. I can put that into the chat while Reverend Mr. Nowruz joins me. And you can just click on the store. All right. So, Reverend Mr. Nowruz.
Hello, Stephen.
I was just sharing with the audience that Reverend Mr. Gilchrist had Star Wars toys attending a mass in his universe, and I forgot to ask him that, he obviously, Darth Vader would not go on the higher ground, right? He would go on the lower ground.
That's right.
But this was not your childhood at all. You were not born into a Sedevacanist family. Your mother was Catholic, but the exposure to Catholicism for you was an occasional Novus Ordo midnight mass. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, that's right.
So what I find interesting in our conversation the other day as we talked about your journey was this parallel universe between what people in Europe are running into if they're disillusioned and they didn't have a religion growing up, and what people in America were doing. And I told you that in France, when I run into young men your age who've read themselves into the faith, they've usually read French history, they found out what happened, and then they converted.
Yes.
And I always tell the French, I said, that will never happen. No one's ever going to read American history and say, oh, I'm going to convert to Catholicism, because we don't have Catholicism embedded in the way that our country was formed and how the French revolutionary government attacked Catholicism and sent Catholics to die in horrible ways.
Well, I read about the French Revolution myself, and I think that was not immediately. Very few things with me are immediate, but that was the beginning of becoming conservative, was reading about the French Revolution, because that's the genesis of modern leftism. So, yeah, I would say similar, but different circumstances, being an American. Yes.
So I want to talk a little bit about your journey. It was the end of university. You got an economics and international relations degree at
Yes.
UC Davis. And I told you, I think it's mandatory they hand you Birkenstocks when you get to Davis normally.
Yes.
But you had started to realize that our world order was inherently disordered, that there was a problem with it, and there had to be some kind of order, there had to be some kind of ethics, there had to be some kind of morals. And this led you down a certain path, which hilariously enough is parallel to some other seminarians here as well, or maybe not so hilarious, but quite natural.
Yeah, it's the providence of God. But you're right. There has to be a unity to things. There's a unity to nature. There's also a unity to the way the world is going. I mean, things are converging on globalism, centralization, and I studied all these things in economics and also international relations. All these alphabet soup organizations, so on and so forth, trying to tear down borders and cultures and ethnicities. And make everything very homogenous and materialistic. So I was aware of that, I guess, you could say on a meta level, and I didn't like it. I didn't like the disappearance of, I guess you could say, organic culture, traditional culture, things like that. Being the son of an immigrant, I noticed that a lot of immigrants to the United States, especially in California, maybe it's more accelerated there, but they lose their culture in the second generation. Whether you're Hispanic, Middle Eastern, Asian, you become very homogenous. You wear sports jerseys. You don't speak the language of your grandparents anymore. So there's this sort of, the classic analogy is the melting pot, but everyone's becoming this generic American, and we're losing sense with traditional values, respect, hierarchy in society, things like that.
Yeah, this was quite marked in the California Japanese immigrants, actually, before the war. They even called them the Issei and the Nisei, that difference between they had grown up in Japan, allegiance to the emperor, etc., and then these other Japanese who had grown up here with Americans. And it's myself, two-time immigrant, the power of culture. Bishop Sanborn always talks about that it just forms and molds you. That it doesn't matter that you
Yes.
are a Japanese plant. You plant the Japanese plant in California, and then it's going to start adapting to desert conditions. And
Yes, truly.
and that's interesting. And obviously, as you made this transition to realizing the world order needs to be fixed, there's something terribly wrong. Did you lose childhood friends? Did you pick up new friends along the way? Were you able to bring any of your childhood friends along the journey with you?
No, unfortunately, they're not that interested. I think some of them think I'm kind of crazy, and I get into these weird theories, I suppose. Some of them they're happy for me. They say, "Oh, I'm so happy that you're doing you. You found yourself. Yeah, that's your path, man. That's
Right. You're enjoying the journey.
yeah." They think, "Oh, you're really into that, and that's good for you." I'm not into that, so it's whatever.
Right.
But I've made new friends, people who are like-minded. A lot of them are on the internet, so some of them I've met, some of them I've not met. I've made friends in seminary, people we tend to think very similarly about everything we just spoke about. And yeah, I mean, you try to be close to people through God and in God and try to help people advance. Unfortunately, some people in the traditional movement, as you know, some people go, they leave for whatever reason. So yeah, I guess I think that's my answer.
Right. And we have to obviously just keep them in our prayers.
Yes.
Because we've known them. And you had told me that you had to be careful that, and the conclusion of your journey was that as you were searching for this moral order, you found Catholicism and you found traditional Catholicism, and you felt a draw to the priesthood, and you told me you didn't want to let the convert fervor pull you into doing something that didn't necessarily make sense. How were you able to parse that gap between I'm very excited about being a convert and maybe I'm conflating this with becoming a priest? How were you able to parse that over time?
That's a good question. I've never thought about that explicitly. Yeah, I guess it was a grace, a prudence, just to not. Well, I think I just by nature I'm more speculative, and I plan things. I consider things very deeply. In fact, it's interesting. I've always had analysis paralysis, and just overanalyzing things, looking at all the different ways.
Well, you're an econ major. I mean,
Yes.
that's part of the deal.
So I just didn't want to rush into it and then fail. However, when the notion persisted, I said, if I have a vocation, I have to strike when the iron's hot. I have to try. And if I fail, then I failed in good conscience. But yeah, I just initially didn't want to go. I was baptized in 2018, and I said, I don't want to enter seminary this calendar year because that's just too soon. I felt it was too soon. I don't know how else to explain it. I just thought it would be rash.
And then what tipped you over? Was it just giving yourself enough space and time?
Yeah, it kept persisting. So I spoke to my priest back in California, Father Thomas Zapp. I told him I think I have an inclination to be a priest. I don't know. I've been praying, and this idea has been in my head for some time. And he said you should visit the seminary and just take it step by step. And that's what I did. That was the first step. Is I reached out to the seminary and I visited and decided to give it my best.
And now you're in major order, so there's no going back.
There's no going back. Yes.
Does it feel like it was a long time, a short time?
Yes, it felt like a very long time in the beginning. When I visited, I felt the first day was an eternity, because I turned my phone off and I put it in the desk and I just followed the schedule, and it was very monastic like. And the first year was very long. There was a lot of just being washed with the Catholic discipline, and just having my soul being formed to the schedule and to the prayer life. That felt very long, the first year. Second year, a little bit less long, a little bit shorter. I think, but as always, I think the years have sped up. This past year, it's already March 15, 16. What is today?
It's before St. Patrick's. It's the 16th
It's
today.
the 16th of March, yeah. Yeah, our subdeacon was over a week ago, so it's just a week ago, yeah. So, yes.
If there are any questions for Reverend Mr. Nowers, you can put them in the chat. I can't promise that we'll get to all of them, but if you'd like to, while he's still with us, please feel free to ask questions. So you are now a subdeacon, so you're required to say the office. And I had the same question for Reverend Mr. Gilchrist, which was the idea of how is that different? Because obviously you've been saying parts of the office for years, Vespers, Compline,
Yes.
Prime in the morning, but now it's your job.
Mm-hmm.
And how has that changed? I know it's not been very long since you started, but how can you just reflect on how that's been for you?
Yeah, it's more intellectual. I know I have to do it. I know the gravity. But I mean, part of seminary is taking everything very seriously regarding the Catholic religion, the priesthood. You have to take it very seriously. So thanks be to God, there's been a gradual acceptance of the seriousness of everything we do. The prayer life, the sacrifices we make. A month before, last summer I was saying the office, and then a month before I started saying it again. Everything except for the little hours, the terce, sext, and none. But I was saying matins, lauds on my own, and then we say prime, vespers, and compline in the seminary schedule. So I think that was a good preparation.
So you were ramping up already in your own way.
Yes, I was told to do that. And I'm glad I did. So it hasn't been too much different. The little hours are fairly easy. The difficult part is matins and lauds. You have to get that done. Try to get it done ahead of time, or else you have to figure something out in the afternoon, which you don't want to do. You can say it the night before, which is called anticipating. You could say it the morning of, which many people recommend. But then the seminary schedule helps you with prime, vespers, and compline. So it's very nice to do compline and then to know, okay, I'm done with the office for today. I can go rest and then wake up and do it again tomorrow.
So last question I have for you today is, do you have any idea of where you might be assigned? Has the bishop talked to you about that, or is that not settled yet?
They've spoken to me about working in the seminary. I think I would really like that. Thanks be to God, I've been doing well in the classes, and I've always been kind of academically inclined. And I think I do well in explaining things to people, helping break down more complicated concepts into simpler concepts. And yeah, I'd like to try that, and with God's grace, we'll see how that goes.
Okay. Well, it was a pleasure having you. And if you want, you can send the final subdeacon in.
Okay. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you very much, Reverend. So while we're waiting for our final subdeacon to join us, I've got a message from the Australian mission of the Institute, of the Roman Catholic Institute, which is that there is an event happening in the Northern Hemisphere summer, but the Southern Hemisphere winter, which is something called Catholic Singles Connect. And I'm going to grab the dates, August 22 through 25. And I'm just going to give you some information about it. Firstly, you need to be 18 to 32 years of age. You need to be a sedevacantist, and you need to be single. Makes sense. There will be daily masses, meals, and games together. Visits to one of the most beautiful cities in the world, which will include a trip to the iconic Sydney Opera House and a scenic ferry boat tour of Sydney Harbour. Someone who's done that, I can tell you it's quite beautiful. Bowling afternoon and evening to make new friends and have lots of fun. Everything will be supervised by Father Palma and Father Eldracher. And the event itself is under the patronage of Our Lady Help of Christians. There are easy payment methods that the fathers have put together. And I'll read those fees quickly. So one person will be $365, and that could be a single payment or 2 payments or 3 payments. This includes lodging for 3 nights, meals, transportation, visits to the city, ferry cruise, and bowling day. It's a lot, but it does not include, obviously, your airfare, which may not be so much if you're in Australia, but will probably be a lot more if you're in Europe or North America or South America. Some discounts include if there are 2 siblings or close relatives together, i.e. 2 young ladies or 2 young men, not mixed pairs, that would be $545. And for 3 siblings or close relatives together, this would be $730. So effectively, one person attends for free. I'll put the email address in the chat at some point before the end of today's live stream, so you might reach out if you have any further questions. Welcome, Reverend Mr. Ingham.
Thank you.
So if you could tell our watchers and listeners a little bit about, I suppose, your family, how many siblings you have, where you are in that order, and
I have 7 siblings. There's 3 brothers and 4 sisters.
and where are you?
I'm the second oldest.
Okay. And as we've talked before, people always give me a hard time that I've moved around a lot. And I said, well, where are you from? And I say, well, that's kind of complicated, and I'll walk through different places. But as we were talking last week, I thought, well, you had quite a bit yourself. I wrote down Montana, Idaho, Texas, Florida, Maine. Am I missing anything?
We were in Hawaii for 3 years.
So yeah, I missed that. So you obviously bring all these different experiences and backgrounds to being here now in Reading with us. Is there a favorite place of any of those that you've lived?
Probably Montana, in the Rockies.
Montana's very, very special and
Yeah.
beautiful. So we were talking with Reverend Mr. Gilchrist and Reverend Mr. Nauruz, and they had quite different calls. So Reverend Mr. Gilchrist, since he was 5-6 years old, had his action figures attending Mass. Reverend Mr. Nauruz had to convert to Catholicism first, right? That was quite a journey. So quite recent. Are you somewhere in between those two? Not 5 years old, not...
Yeah. I think it was just a typical gradual process of discovering the truth. My parents converted to the Novus Ordo, and then they were always in the conservative circles, praying the rosary, true devotion to Mary, and the people wearing the veils and all of these traditional things. They gravitated towards these people, these groups. And so obviously they were shocked and confused between the contrast of what they were reading about, true Catholicism, and then everything that they were seeing. And so eventually they they just started learning more, and it was a gradual process of from the Novus Ordo to the SSPX, from the SSPX to found out about the CMRI, and then from there we learned about Bishop Sanborn and this seminary, and that's where we've been since.
Did that call parallel that transition where you weren't necessarily feeling it in the Novus Ordo, but you felt more of a call as your family got more traditional, or was it always there in the background?
Well, I think when I was 13, I was in the minor seminary with the CMRI for a year and a half, and I didn't have a strong inclination to the priesthood, but I learned that the priest who was running the minor seminary, Father Benedict Hughes, he thought I had a vocation. I learned that a few years or shortly before I entered the seminary. And I think that was actually what prompted me to look into the seminary, was when he told me that he thought that I had a vocation.
From when he remembered you from when you were younger?
Correct. So when I heard that, I thought, okay, well, I'll look into it, and I did.
So he said it, he articulated it, and it resonated. You thought, yes, that's true. Why haven't I thought of that? Or was it like, that's right?
Well, to tell you the truth, before that, I was praying about what direction my life should go in, what I was going to do, and then so when I heard that, it actually hit me like a ton of bricks. I thought, okay, maybe that's what I'm supposed to do.
Did you have doubts about your abilities prior to that? Was something that was holding you back, or?
No, I just never thought about joining until I heard that he had thought that, and then that's really what prompted it.
There's someone named Truth Ingham who just gave $100 super chat. I don't know who that is.
Thanks, Truth. That's my brother.
Thank you, Truth. Of course, I know Truth and I had a chance to help out at Father De La Chanoine's ordination in Nantes some years ago. So thank you for the donation, Truth. So I've asked both Reverend Mr. Gilchrist and Reverend Mr. Nauruz about saying the office, and as a newly minted, you could say, subdeacon, you've now had the obligation to say the office for a little while at least. How has that impacted your spiritual life and your schedule, frankly?
Well, I remember during my first year of seminary, Bishop Dolan, he preached a retreat on the divine office, and that was pretty impactful. It gave me a great appreciation for the liturgy, liturgical prayer. And so actually since then, I've been looking forward to the subdiaconate in particular because of the obligation of praying the office. And so it makes your spiritual life very liturgical, obviously. You're sort of immersed in the feast days of the church. And so there's an opportunity in that to make that sort of the backbone of your prayer life, is the sacred liturgy, which I think for a priest it should be. That should really be your spiritual food. The nourishment of your own soul is the sacred liturgy, because that's your work, that's your life. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think for those of us who don't say the office, but maybe sometimes we'll read, Dom Granger pulls things from the office and puts it into the liturgical year. So I often say liturgical year is a mini way for lay people to participate in the office, and just reading the accounts of
Yeah, Dom Granger is excellent. He's very, very good.
It's extraordinary, and I feel like when I read that, I feel like I get to know a little bit about what you do on a daily basis when you're saying the office and all the things that you're exposed to, and it's a reminder that these two things go together, the liturgy and the office, it's a harmony, and it's a great blessing to be able to say that.
It is. It's an honor.
And have you had a chance to have a discussion? I know your ordination is actually, even though you recently been ordained to the subdiaconate, and the diaconal ordination will be June the 24th, I think, Feast
Yes.
of St. John the Baptist.
Yeah.
You're not actually going to have your priestly ordination for another year.
Correct.
Is that correct? Have you had any conversations with Bishop Sanborn about where you might end up?
Yeah, I think the plan is for me to work down in Florida, is the last I heard. with the school down there.
So there's a boys' school in Florida that then potentially, God willing, Father would be working at, and you'd be joining obviously Father Barnes, Father Desai, and the two bishops that are down there as well.
Correct.
I was telling Bishop Sanborn that you'll make liturgy a little easier. That having two bishops and having two priests is not as simple, let's say, for solemn mass. But if you're there,
Right.
there's a third
Right.
priest. It's like chess moves. Like, okay, if I have two bishops and I have three priests, then what do I do? So heading down to Florida, and we're in exams this week. Yes. So do you have more exams to go? Are you done with them already?
Nope. We've done three, and there's three more coming up. The big ones, the dogmatic courses and moral.
You have dogmatic theology.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. Just giving me that look.
That's part of it.
So American Set of Probation is $2. Has Bishop talked about your priestly assignment? I did not mean to preempt your super chat, but thank you for the super chat. Teodoro Boggio, $20. May God bless you all. Thank you, Teodoro. Thank you. Tom Mastroianni, $19.99. Thank you, Tom. What are one or two things you recall parents doing that helped with your vocation and determination to pursue the priesthood?
That's the question that my parents did.
That maybe it's a atmosphere that your parents created,
Yeah.
or maybe opportunities that they gave you. I suppose one would be letting you attend a minor seminary when you were younger.
They were always encouraging of that. Any interest in the priesthood, they never tried to convince me otherwise or anything. It was always a lot of support.
It might be hard sometimes, I suppose, for parents. They don't want to get too excited and, well, you have to do this, and,
Right.
The family's counting on you. And I suppose trying to be disinterested in saying if that's something. So
Yeah.
It sounds like they gave you the space to figure it out without necessarily.
Yeah, they very much had the attitude that if this is God's will that they want, then that's what they want from me. So, yeah, I'm very blessed in that sense.
So, I suppose, too, same thing that happened for me growing up, Novus Ordo Conservative, praying the rosary and having that
Yes.
Catholic atmosphere at home,
Yes.
I suppose, is another push.
Correct. Yeah.
So I hope, Tom, that answers your question. I think 50% of it, or even 70% of it, is making sure that there's a Catholic atmosphere in the home, so that such vocations have
A prayer life in the home will it's you can't value that enough. The daily rosary, morning and night prayers, all of that.
enthronement of the Sacred Heart.
Yes, all of that. Yeah.
All right. Well, I thank you. I know it's exams, so I'm going to let you get back to your studies. Thank you for
Thank you,
joining
Stephen.
us.
All right. So just set out.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
And I will repeat again what I had said regarding the Catholic Singles Connect, that I would put the email address in the chat, which I'm doing right now, maryheplpofchristianschapel.au @gmail.com. So you can email Father Palma or Father Eldracker if you're interested. Catholic Singles Connect, August 22 through 25 if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, our summer, Southern Hemisphere is winter in Sydney. It should be lovely. And having visited the Australian Catholics at mission several times in my life, I can tell you that they're really wonderful, very dedicated people. And even if you don't run into someone who you end up getting married to, you're going to make some wonderful friends. And I think that is in itself worthwhile. As last reminder, I will, for those who may be joining the stream late, there's also the store, which I posted in the chat, which has these items, this tumbler for hot or cold drinks. All of these have the seminary's logo in English. This is a notebook, and finally a mug. So you're welcome to buy those in the store. If you are at the King of Prussia or Harrisburg missions, there will be order forms tomorrow at Mass, so you don't need to worry about shipping. They'll be brought to you. They'll be brought to the Mass Center on a Sunday, so you can save money on shipping by being close by to the items. We want to thank you for your support, everyone who gave a super chat, or everyone who was watching the stream. Please keep these young men in your prayers. priests are so precious these days. That's one of the challenges that we have when we read back in church history and we see there are just so many priests. And even prior to Vatican II, there were just so many priests that Bishop Sanborn shared with us that they had 3 days off a week in the Brooklyn Archdiocese. So that's not the case now. I don't know if the priests really have any days off per week. So the last question I want to answer was from a gentleman who was asking about what's the relation of MHT to the British Leicestershire Sedevacantist Church. So you have to keep in mind there's a distinction between MHT, which is the seminary, and the Roman Catholic Institute, which produces many, MHT seminary produces many priests who end up joining the Roman Catholic Institute. So if you're referring to that mission, which South Kilworth Town Hall, I think is where the masses are, although it's now starting to move a little closer. I think the Easter Mass will be outside London, but outside the ULEZ zone. So you'll have to go to the website. I want to say that's catholicmass.co.uk. I hope I'm saying that right. If not, Frankie will kill me. But you can find out more details there. But obviously, they are connected. The Institute clergy who have been educated here at MHT are servicing that mission. So you could say there's a indirect connection because they're not really technically MHT priests, they're Institute priests, but they went to school here at MHT Seminary. So hope that is helpful. Wondering, have I forgotten anything, Father?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, thank you again for your support. Thank you for joining us. Feel free to share, like this, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and make sure that other people can hear about the formation of future young priests from their own mouth. And if you didn't send a super thanks, if you didn't send a super chat, feel free to send a super thanks when you watch this later on.